In this video, we'll be creating a resource in AWS using Terraform. So in this video, we'll be looking into what are needed to create a resource using Terraform. So for one, to start with, it's not mandatory to know all the providers. If you're well versed at one provider configuration in Terraform, it would be the same syntax in every other provider. So if you're well versed at AWS, you would have the capacity to create infrastructures in Azure, GitHub, Oracle, Alibaba, any provider. So that's point number one. So we'll be continuing our sessions with AWS throughout this course. Number two, the credentials. So as we saw in the previous videos, one way of setting up the credential is having the credentials set in the configuration, which is not recommended. The other way is using the AWS CLI. So the AWS CLI one is the recommended way of storing the credentials. We have already said that here. If you haven't seen on how to do that, please check over my previous videos. And the third is the resource configuration. So this is the important part. This is where we'll be defining the resources. We'll be defining the configuration of the resources. And this is the configuration using which the resource will be created. So I mentioned over here that there are three different parts to it. One is the resource, one is the provider resource name, and the third part is the local name. Let's see on what that is. So let's go to Terraform registry, AWS, and here we'll be going to documentation. Right. So these are all the resource names. Let's say I'll search for EC2 over here, and here under Elastic Compute Cloud we'll be seeing all the resource names over here. So this is the way Terraform would identify what resource it is. So for VM it is AWS instance, and if you see the example over here, it would be resource followed by AWS instance followed by local name. So this local name can be anything, but this should be ideally what is there in the Terraform registry. So these are all the different resource names that's available. Let's go to our VS Code. So here we can see the resource followed by the resource name which is mentioned in the Terraform, and we can provide any name. This would be the local name. This won't reflect in the console. This is for our local reference within this configuration. So let's have it as whatever. So the next things to create a VM is, let's see what are all the mandatory things that's needed. AMI is optional, but if you're not going to give AMI, you have to provide a launch template. So either launch template or AMI is mandatory. So we have provided AMI over here. Even instance type is not mandatory, but since we are using a free version, we would stick to t2.micro. So that's why I've mentioned over here. So apart from AMI, everything else is optional over here, if you see. But ideally, when we create a configuration, it's better to provide what all configuration we need instead of leaving it to the default ones. That way, we'll be knowing all the configurations that's available within our VM. Ideally, in production case, we'll be providing most of the configuration that's mentioned over here. But since this is just for a learning purpose, I'm providing whatever is mandatory and needed. So AMI and instance type. Let me clear the screen. So the first thing is Terraform init. So this would initiate the providers. Whatever provider we have mentioned over here, a separate plugin would be created for that specific provider. So this has been initialized. Let's do Azure as well. Let's do a Terraform init again. And if you watch over here, within the provider plugin, we just have AWS for now. Once we have installed Azure, we would have the plugin for Azure as well. Okay, let's check over here. So we have one for AWS and one for Azure now. See, so this is the reason why we are doing a Terraform in it. It initiates the plugins, whatever is needed for that specific provider, that would be pre-installed over here in our local. So this is done. The next thing is we'll do a Terraform plan. The reason for doing a Terraform plan is it would showcase what all is going to happen when we execute this command. So if I do a Terraform plan, it will show what resources would be created, what would be deleted, and what would be changed. The highlights of those resources would be mentioned over here. Okay. So it says like 1 to add, 0 to change, and 0 to destroy. And what would be added would be mentioned here as well. AWS instance dot whatever would be created. So whatever is something that's for a local reference. It won't reflect in the provider end, as I said before. So let's do a Terraform apply. So whenever we do a Terraform apply, it would ask for a confirmation whether you need to create this resource or whether you need to delete this resource or not, something of that sort. So here. So we'll be creating a resource over here and it's asking for a confirmation. We'll give S over here. So the resource is being created. Let's go to the console and see if that's being happening. Let's do a refresh. The resource is being created. So this is pretty much to sum up what Terraform init, Terraform plan, and Terraform apply are. These three are the major commands that we'll be using throughout the session. This is the command to create the resource, Terraform apply. Yeah, so it says the resource has been created and this is the ID. That's the same over here and it's in running status. So with this, we'll conclude this video. We'll see more in detail in our upcoming videos.